In 1962, Marilyn Monroe reached a breaking point. She was prepared to step in front of cameras and speak publicly about what she knew, information that threatened to shake the foundations of a powerful political legacy. She had intimate knowledge of two of the most influential men in the country, and after years of silence, she no longer intended to protect anyone. Then, just 3 months after her now legendary birthday performance, she was gone. Authorities ruled her death a suicide, but that explanation has never fully settled. Witnesses later described unfamiliar figures at her home that night. Others recalled the sound of breaking glass, and at least one person reported seeing documents removed from the house. A nearby neighbor claimed a man arrived in a government vehicle only hours before her body was discovered. The mystery is not whether events unfolded behind closed doors. It is who ensured the truth would remain forever out of reach. Marilyn Monroe began life far from glamour. She was born Norma Jean Mortensen on June 1, 1926, in Los Angeles, into circumstances marked by instability and absence. Her mother, Gladys Pearl Baker, struggled severely with mental illness, and by 1933, she was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Norma Jean was 7 years old when doctors intervened. Shortly afterward, Gladys suffered a devastating breakdown and was committed to Patton State Hospital. Though her mother was still alive, she vanished completely from Norma Jean's daily world. From that moment on, permanence became something she never knew. The next 9 years were defined by constant movement. Foster home followed foster home, each one temporary, each one unfamiliar. By the age of 11, she had already lived in 11 different households. Every relocation meant starting over, new rules, new adults, and the lingering fear that she did not truly belong anywhere. Stability was never long enough to feel real. One of the few steady figures in her early life was Grace McKee, her mother's closest friend, who became her legal guardian. Grace cared for Norma Jean and believed in her, but she could not provide a permanent home. In September of 1935, when Norma Jean was 9 years old, Grace made the difficult decision to place her at the Los Angeles Orphans Home Society, known as Holly Grove on North El Centro Avenue. On paper, it was a respectable institution, orderly, clean, and well-run. Inside, however, Norma Jean felt profoundly alone. She remained there for 2 years, until the summer of 1937, enduring teasing from other children who saw her as awkward, thin, and distant. She coped by retreating inward. Her imagination became her refuge. Long before she ever stepped onto a soundstage, movie stars had already taken residence in her mind. She pictured glowing faces on massive screens, lives that seemed warm, secure, and filled with meaning. Over time, these dreams stopped being simple fantasies and became a survival mechanism, something she returned to whenever the real world felt too uncertain to face. But even before Holly Grove, deeper wounds had already been inflicted. While living with Grace and her husband, Irving Goddard, Norma Jean was sexually abused at the age of 8. Years later, she documented the experience in her private writings, describing the lasting shame and sense of worthlessness it left behind. In the 1950s, she spoke about it openly with her acting coach, Lee Strasberg, and her therapist, Dr. Ralph Green's son, explaining that no one had believed her when she was a child. The betrayal reshaped how she understood trust, intimacy, and safety. Even as the world later celebrated her, those early feelings of damage and disbelief never fully disappeared. At the orphanage, she learned to endure quietly. She followed rules, avoided drawing attention, and tried not to want too much. Need, she learned, was dangerous. Films became her safest escape. Foster families often sent her to movie theaters simply to occupy her time, and she would sit through the same screenings again and again. She studied expressions, memorized voices, and absorbed the rhythm of performance. Grace noticed her beauty early on and believed it could protect her. In 1938, when Norma Jean was 13, Grace dyed her hair platinum blonde, inspired by Jean Harlow, and told her she was destined to become a star. It was the first time someone else gave voice to the dream she had been quietly holding onto for years. In 1942, Grace remarried and faced another difficult choice. To prevent Norma Jean from being sent back to institutional care, she arranged for her to marry James Doherty, a 21-year-old neighbor. Norma Jean was only 15. The marriage freed her from the orphanage system, but it also forced her into adulthood far too soon. From that point forward, she kept moving forward instinctively, always searching for the next doorway, because she understood better than most what it meant to have none at all. By 1944, she was 18 and working at the radio plane company in Burbank, a factory producing remote-controlled target drones for military training during the war. The company manufactured thousands of OQ-3 models for the U.S. Army and Navy. Norma Jean earned $20 a week inspecting and coating parachutes. That summer, Army photographer David Conover arrived to document female workers and boost morale. He noticed her immediately. She was shy and spoke with a stutter, but the camera revealed something deeper, an intensity that lingered beneath the surface. Conover photographed her, and those images began circulating. Within months, she left the factory floor behind and entered the world of modeling. By late 1945, she was appearing in magazine spreads, her wartime images capturing the optimism and longing of the era. In 1946, she signed with a Blue Book modeling agency run by Emmeline Snively, where her transformation became deliberate and methodical. For 3 months, Snively trained her rigorously, pushing her to lose weight, correcting her posture, and coaching her into the soft, breathy speaking style that would later define her public persona. Her hair was bleached repeatedly, her walk rehearsed, her image refined for pin-up and glamour photography. Snively believed her curves and charm were perfectly suited for cheesecake-style modeling, and she shaped her accordingly. The training came at a cost. Snively charged a $100 fee, roughly $1,300 today, which Norma Jean paid out of her first modeling earnings. The results were immediate. By the end of 1946, her face had appeared in the covers of 33 magazines. The name Marilyn Monroe was no longer just an idea. It was becoming an identity she was being carefully taught to inhabit. That same year, she appeared as a showgirl in Earl Carroll's Review, where the demand for perfection intensified. Accounts from the time suggest she barely ate in order to maintain her figure, a pattern that soon affected her health. She experienced fatigue, irregular menstrual cycles, and early signs of reproductive complications. These struggles foreshadowed the chronic pain and fertility issues that would follow her later in life, along with deep sorrow over her inability to have children. The body that drew constant admiration was also a body enduring quiet suffering. As attention grew, so did the risks. The same photographs that lifted the spirits of soldiers also brought her closer to powerful men who viewed young women as accessible and expendable. Fame was opening doors, but not all of them led somewhere safe. As her visibility increased, so did the cost of being seen. Monroe later spoke openly about how often she was reduced to a body rather than regarded as a person. Accounts from the period describe a steady pattern of unwanted attention, propositions, physical intrusions, and casual harassment that were quietly accepted as part of the industry's unspoken rules. The experience left her deeply wary of Hollywood's private world. It also planted something lasting inside her, a growing need for control. She understood, even then, how quickly a promising career could become a cage when everyone around you believed they were entitled to a piece of you. Still, she continued trying to make the studio system work. On July 31, 1946, she signed her first major Hollywood contract with 20th Century Fox under the name Norma Jean Doherty. The agreement ran 17 pages and bound her to the studio for 6 months. Her pay was set at $125 per week, a routine rate for untested performers. What followed, however, was disappointment. The roles she was given were small and forgettable, but appearances that offered no room to grow. In 1948, she played a hat-check girl in Scudda Who, Scudda Hey, and with those shallow roles, the early outline of the dumb blonde stereotype began to take shape around her. When the contract term ended, Fox chose not to renew it. On August 25, 1947, she was released. She tried to find footing elsewhere, including an unsuccessful screen test at Paramount. Without a studio backing her, every step forward required more effort, more uncertainty. In 1948, she turned to acting coach Natasha Lytis. Lytis pushed her relentlessly through formal acting technique, elocution training, and intense emotional preparation. Over time, the relationship moved beyond teacher and student. Lytis became her confidant, and rumors of a romantic attachment followed them for years. Their bond lasted nearly 7 years, during which Lytis coached Monroe on more than 20 films, often appearing uninvited on set and clashing with directors who resented her presence. Monroe later credited Lytis with helping her develop discipline and confidence as an actress. But the relationship also created dependency and strain. By 1956, Monroe severed ties, determined, at least publicly, to stand on her own. Between contracts, money was scarce, and survival forced difficult decisions. After being dropped by Fox, she supported herself through modeling work, including nude photography. On May 27, 1949, she posed nude for photographer Tom Kelly at his Los Angeles studio. He paid her $50 for the session, roughly $500 today. To protect her screen identity, she signed a release under the name Mona Monroe. The photographs were intended for a modest calendar titled Golden Dreams. At the time, it seemed like a closed chapter. It was not. 4 years later, in December 1953, Hugh Hefner paid $500 to acquire those same images for the inaugural issue of Playboy. Monroe had not given direct permission for their use. The magazine reportedly sold 50,000 copies almost immediately, launching Playboy as a cultural force and tying Monroe even more tightly to a sexualized public image she did not control. The scandal followed her relentlessly. It caused personal pain, but it also made her impossible to ignore. By 1952, when the photos resurfaced during publicity for Don't Bother to Knock, the attention pressured Fox into signing her again. The professional gain came at a cost, her privacy vanished, and the strain on her mental health intensified. In 1950, Monroe appeared in All About Eve with a role so brief it could easily have disappeared into the background. She played Miss Caswell, delivering only a handful of lines. Yet she made them linger. Her voice carried that now familiar blend of innocence and longing, as if she were performing and pleading for opportunity at the same time. On set, she improvised a line that sent a cast into laughter. What if the name is Butler? And even seasoned veterans took notice. The scene was filmed at San Francisco's Curran Theater, and the pressure overwhelmed her. Acting alongside Hollywood legends, she was reportedly so nervous she vomited off stage before filming. Then, she returned and delivered the moment that mattered. George Sanders, who portrayed Addison DeWitt, later recalled her as humble and inquisitive, someone who spent breaks quietly reading Rainer Maria Rilke's letters to a young poet. That combination of vulnerability and focus caught the attention of studio head Darryl F. Zanuck, who soon offered her a 7-year contract. For the first time, a door truly opened. But Hollywood doors rarely open without testing whether they will close just as quickly. The Asphalt Jungle in 1950 nearly shut that door again. Director John Huston initially dismissed her for the role of Angela Finlay. Then he watched her leave his office and change his mind, later remarking that she was one of the few actresses who could make an entrance simply by exiting a room. The role had originally been intended for Lola Albright, but when she became unavailable, Monroe was called back. Skepticism followed immediately. Critics questioned the casting, and many continued to treat her as a one-note performer. Still, she approached the role with instinct rather than calculation, delivering a performance that felt natural and unforced. Huston praised her work, and though her screen time was limited, the impression she left was not. She was 24 years old, and the film grossed over $2 million in its first year. It did not make her a star, but it made dismissing her far more difficult. Then the roles began to deepen. Clash by Night in 1952 stripped away glitter and punchlines, casting her as Mildred, a fish cannery worker with raw, uncomfortable emotions. It was a different kind of exposure, one that revealed not just her presence, but her potential. In Clash by Night, she embodied boredom and loneliness as if they were visible injuries, marks that could not be concealed by lighting or makeup. Audiences were unsettled by what they saw. This was not polish or fantasy. It was exposed feeling. Critics responded by calling it her first truly serious dramatic performance. Yet while the camera captured that vulnerability, her private life was beginning to fracture. Her struggle with barbiturates had already taken hold. What began as prescribed sleeping medication for chronic insomnia and anxiety soon escalated. By the early 1950s, she was using drugs such as Nimbutal, Seconal, and Amytal, at times mixing them with alcohol in an effort to silence her own thoughts. She even joked about it in interviews, delivering lines that landed uneasily, remarks about planning suicide one day and laughing it off the next. The humor barely masked distress. Behind the scenes, the spiral was tightening, and it would not let go easily. Still, the public demanded brilliance. In 1953, Gentlemen Prefer Blonde arrived, bringing with it the image that would define her for a generation. The diamonds are a girl's best friend sequence, soaked in pink, wrapped in a gown designed by William Travilla, turned her into a living poster. The scene took days to complete. She reportedly rehearsed close to 40 times, repeating the choreography until every movement and pause aligned perfectly. The effort paid off. The film earned $5.1 million at the box office and cemented her status as a major star. The set itself was energetic and often chaotic, filled with rapid-fire musical numbers like Little Girl from Little Rock. Through it all, she held her position, balancing charm with precise control, even as anxiety threatened to pull her inward. This is where Jane Russell became essential. The popular myth of constant rivalry between women on set did not apply here. During filming, Russell and Monroe formed a genuine bond. When Monroe's fear kept her confined to her dressing room, Russell would coax her out. She encouraged her towards steadiness, inviting her to Bible study, while Monroe joked about introducing Russell to Freud. It was an unlikely friendship, warm and grounded, built on humor and mutual understanding. Russell later spoke about Monroe's intelligence and her deep insecurity, tracing it back to a childhood that never offered safety. On screen, they were glamour and comedy. Off-screen, they were two women navigating long days, and one quietly helping the other stay afloat. Later that same year, How to Marry a Millionaire pushed her popularity even further. As Paula Debevoise, she displayed impeccable comic timing, earning even more affection from audiences. The success, however, sharpened the very image she struggled against. The dumb blonde label grew stronger, an identity she learned to wield even as she resented it. The film brought in $1.25 million in rentals, and her performance became iconic. But the work was grueling. She had difficulty memorizing lines and sometimes required dozens of takes to complete a single scene. Co-stars, including Betty Grable, offered quiet support. The set learned to move carefully around her needs, down to small gestures, like Grable arranging a surprise pedicure to keep Monroe's feet camera-ready. Even a seemingly simple lunch scene on a penthouse terrace, complete with champagne and hot dogs, demanded careful orchestration. It looked effortless. It never felt that way. By 1954, Monroe wanted more than successful roles. She wanted control. She founded Marilyn Monroe Productions, an unprecedented move for a leading actress in the 1950s. The decision openly challenged a studio system built on compliance. Independence, however, came with consequences. The company drew scrutiny from the IRS amid suspicions of irregular accounting, leading to audits, financial pressure, and public legal disputes. While the company continued to exist for tax and contract purposes, it never went on to produce additional films. The pursuit of autonomy brought its own weight, one that settled permanently on her shoulders. The work soon became physically punishing as well. River of No Return in 1954 took her to the Canadian Yukon, where harsh weather, swarming mosquitoes, and illness stripped away any remaining glamour. She fell sick during production. Director Otto Preminger exited the project midway, and Jean Negulesco stepped in, recreating dangerous river sequences on sound stages using water tanks and wave machines. Rumors of a romance with co-star Robert Mitchum circulated, never confirmed, always whispered. Through exhaustion and discomfort, she delivered a performance that lingered with audiences, as though the hardship itself had been absorbed into the character. At the same time, her personal life was unraveling. On January 14, 1954, she married baseball legend Joe DiMaggio in a brief civil ceremony in San Francisco. To the public, it looked like a perfect American pairing, the sports hero and the movie star. Privately, their expectations clashed almost immediately. DiMaggio wanted privacy and domestic quiet. Monroe wanted work, attention, and independence. During their honeymoon in Japan and Korea, her USO performances drew crowds of up to 30,000 people, sparking scenes of chaos as fans surged to see her. Jealousy and control followed them home. After just 274 days, she filed for divorce in October 1954, citing mental cruelty and emotional isolation. The marriage ended quickly, but its tension lingered. Searching for stability of a different kind, she later married playwright Arthur Miller on June 29, 1956, after converting to Judaism. On paper, the union promised intellect, calm, and depth. But the timing could not have been worse. The McCarthy era had turned association into suspicion. Miller was investigated by the House Un-American Activities Committee, and the FBI opened a file on Monroe because of her connection to him and his alleged leftist sympathies. Her travels and friendships were monitored, even during their honeymoon in England. The press piled on. Columnist Walter Winchell mocked the pairing, calling her the darling of left-wing intellectuals. The spotlight never softened. It only shifted its shape. The pressure did not remain outside the walls of her life. It worked its way inward. Years of surveillance and scrutiny slowly turned privacy into something theoretical, as though her existence were being documented, monitored, and evaluated in real time. In that environment, paranoia did not need imagination, it needed only memory. By 1960, the strain was beginning to surface in new ways. During the production of Let's Make Love, Monroe became involved with French actor Yves Montand. The affair unfolded in plain sight, long hours together on set, shared dinners, public appearances that left little room for denial. The scandal escalated quickly because Montand was married to Simone Signoret. Montand later described the relationship as something that happened naturally, without planning. Arthur Miller, Monroe's husband at the time, reportedly chose not to confront it, perhaps to avoid a conflict he could not resolve. Signoret endured public humiliation, yet she never placed blame on Monroe. When filming ended, Monroe attempted to resume the relationship, but it did not continue. What remained was damage, fuel for gossip, and another reminder that success could not protect her from isolation. Beneath every headline, one desire remained unreachable. After her divorce from Miller in 1961, Monroe was linked romantically to Frank Sinatra and rumored to have had a brief involvement with Montgomery Clift. But the men were not the deepest wound. Motherhood was. She suffered miscarriages in both 1957 and 1958, complications attributed to endometriosis. The losses devastated her. She wanted a child deeply and spoke of it often to those close to her. Accounts later suggested that Joe DiMaggio blamed her inability to have children as part of the breakdown of their marriage, saying he wanted a family and she could not give him one. Whether expressed so bluntly or not, the injury stayed with her. She carried the grief quietly, and the unfulfilled dream became another layer in the mystery surrounding her life. On May 19, 1962, Marilyn Monroe stepped onto the stage at Madison Square Garden like a living flash of light. It was President John F. Kennedy's birthday celebration, and the atmosphere was already charged. Then she appeared wearing a sheer, flesh-tone gown designed by Jean Lewis, encrusted with more than 2,500 hand-sewn rhinestones. The dress reportedly cost $12,000 and was so tight it had to be sewn onto her body. When she leaned into the microphone and softly sang, "Happy birthday, Mr. President," the room froze. It was not received as a performance. It felt personal, intimate, loaded. That moment did not begin the rumors. It intensified them. Stories had already circulated suggesting Monroe and Kennedy had met multiple times between October 1961 and August 1962. Attention often turned to Peter Lawford, who moved comfortably between Hollywood and political circles and was frequently described as the bridge connecting two worlds that were never meant to overlap. After Kennedy entered the White House, the gossip grew louder and then more unsettling. Some accounts later claimed Monroe's home was monitored. Discussions of declassified FBI material and surveillance tied to both Monroe and the Kennedy brothers reinforced the belief that she was being watched more closely than the public realized. Whether exaggerated, partially true, or shaped by fear, the effect was the same. The pressure never eased. By the spring of 1962, the narrative shifted again. As Kennedy reportedly distanced himself, some biographers and witnesses claim Monroe became involved with Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General and the President's younger brother. Author James Spada is often cited for the theory that she was redirected from one brother to the other once JFK lost interest. Alleged meetings were said to take place at locations like the Carlyle Hotel in New York and Peter Lawford's beach house in Los Angeles. Stories repeated familiar images, party rooms where Monroe appeared alongside both brothers, and recollections from figures like Shirley MacLaine, who described the atmosphere changing instantly when certain people entered the room. Imagine what that environment does to a person like Marilyn Monroe. She was already the most photographed woman in the world. Every movement became evidence. Every relationship turned into speculation. By July 1962, some accounts claim she threatened to speak publicly, even suggesting a press conference. One phrase appears repeatedly in varying versions that her words could end a career. To those surrounding the Kennedys, that possibility reportedly registered as a crisis. Later claims linked FBI and CIA concern to the idea that what she knew or believed she knew, could be framed as a national security risk. Some of this comes from books, some from interviews, some from interpretations of official files. But the pattern remains consistent. The more trapped she felt, the more dangerous she appeared to powerful people, even if the only weapon she possessed was her own truth. While that tension mounted, her body was already failing. Long before 1962, Monroe's private life had been shaped by control, fear, and a studio system that protected images at the expense of women. Some sources claim she underwent as many as 12 abortions during the 1950s, often described as pressured or enforced to avoid scandal and preserve marketability. She reportedly told friends that fame came with a cost, and that the cost felt like infertility and a depression that would not lift. When people discuss this era, other names often surface: Judy Garland, Dorothy Dandridge, women shaped by the same unforgiving machinery, where careers mattered more than bodies. So when Monroe worked, she was not simply performing. She was enduring. During Bus Stop in 1956, she pursued something authentic through method acting, even forming a bond with a horse on set as if calming the animal helped steady herself. But stories from that production repeatedly returned to the same theme: medication. Co-star Don Murray later described her as fragile, struggling with anxiety, breakdowns, missed scenes, and a dangerous mix of drugs meant to control insomnia and fear. She would disappear for hours, return disoriented, and need assistance just to complete her lines. The label became familiar, difficult. The reality may have been simpler. She was drowning in full view. Then came Some Like It Hot in 1959, the bright, fast-paced comedy remembered for its humor and charm. The film grossed over $25 million and became one of the most celebrated works of her career. The final line, "Nobody's perfect," entered cinematic history, often credited to her improvisation. Yet behind the laughter, the production was turbulent once again. She missed days. She forgot dialogue. She leaned heavily on medication. Some accounts suggest she was pregnant during filming and suffered another miscarriage shortly afterward, a loss that deepened her devastation and fed tabloid frenzy. Even in triumph, something was taken from her. By 1961, during the filming of The Misfits, the situation turned alarming. Accounts from the set described chronic pain, extreme insomnia, and dependency so advanced that makeup was sometimes applied while she slept under sedation. Director John Huston reportedly watched as production halted repeatedly due to hospitalizations and detox attempts. The image of the luminous star remained intact for the public. Behind it, Marilyn Monroe was barely holding together. Her co-stars were worried. Clark Gable was gravely ill during the production of The Misfits, and the atmosphere on set felt heavy, thick with heat, exhaustion, and a sense that something was quietly going wrong. Yet even in that environment, people observed the same contradiction they had seen for years. When the camera rolled, Monroe could still reach into herself and pull out something unmistakably real. Her performances cut through the haze, as if emotion lived somewhere deeper than the damage, and could still be summoned when everything else failed. That same year, her mental health crisis became impossible to ignore. In February 1961, following her separation from Arthur Miller, Monroe was admitted to Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in New York. According to multiple accounts, she underwent a series of electroconvulsive therapy sessions, often cited as 12 treatments, under the care of Dr. Ralph Green's son, and remained hospitalized for roughly 3 weeks. She later described the experience as traumatic, saying it disrupted her memory and made it difficult to retain lines. A 6-page letter from this period is frequently referenced, written in a voice that sounds less like a celebrity and more like someone pleading to be understood. Even then, the expectation never shifted. The world still wanted her to smile. In 1962, she attempted another return with Something's Gotta Give, but the situation quickly became public and unforgiving. In June of that year, after missing 34 days of filming due to sinus surgery and severe exhaustion, 20th Century Fox terminated her contract and filed a lawsuit seeking $750,000 in damages. She was replaced by Lee Remick, and the narrative seemed settled, until it wasn't. Reports soon emerged that Dean Martin refused to continue with the project unless Monroe was rehired. Fox reversed course, drawn back by the same forces that had always surrounded her: relentless attention, financial necessity, and the uncomfortable truth that even her instability carried value. Her health, however, did not improve. The tension remained constant. Absences continued. Anxiety never loosened its grip. Beneath everything else was a chronic condition that had shaped her life far more than most people realized. Monroe suffered from endometriosis for years, enduring severe pain and undergoing major surgeries in both 1957 and 1961. The condition contributed to repeated miscarriages and complicated medical treatments that often intensified her depression. Some doctors reportedly recommended extreme measures, including a hysterectomy. She refused. She still wanted children. Each loss, each closed possibility, sharpened her sense of isolation. So when she stood under the lights at Madison Square Garden on May 19, 1962, she was not simply draped in crystals and glamour. She was carrying illness that never rested, grief that had no resolution, and a career that demanded radiance without pause. The dress shimmered. The moment sparkled. But beneath it all, Marilyn Monroe was already exhausted.